Have you ever walked into a place and felt something unexplainable? Maybe a deep sense of peace that wraps around you like a warm blanket, or the opposite, an uneasy tension that makes you want to leave. These feelings aren't random. According to Padre Pio, a revered Catholic saint, certain sacred places hold a profound spiritual energy that can either elevate your soul or weigh it down. But why? What is it about these locations that make them so powerful? For Padre Pio, this wasn't just a philosophical idea. He lived it. He believed that sacred locations, such as places of worship or even natural sites touched by profound events, carried an imprint of divine energy. On the other hand, he warned of spaces tainted by sin or suffering, which he believed retained a lingering unseen energy, a spiritual residue that could affect anyone who entered. Imagine this. You walk into a centuries-old church, and without knowing its history, you feel a deep sense of reverence. That's not a coincidence. Padre Pio explained that years of faith and prayer imbue holy sites with a spiritual atmosphere that connects heaven and earth. But this concept also extends to negative energies. Places marked by tragedy or moral decay may carry a different kind of mystical energy, one that feels oppressive or unsettling. In this video, we'll uncover Padre Pio's beliefs about these energies, exploring the sacred spaces meaning he dedicated his life to understanding. By the end, you'll not only see the world around you differently, but you'll also learn how to discern the energies of places you visit, and perhaps even transform the spaces you inhabit into sanctuaries of peace. Stay with me. This is a journey you won't want to miss. Padre Pio is widely recognized as a spiritual giant, a man deeply connected to both the divine and the mysteries of the unseen world. While his stigmata, miracles, and visions are well documented, what makes him particularly fascinating is his belief in the mystical energy of sacred places. For Padre Pio, these weren't just physical spaces. They were portals to something greater, filled with either divine energy or a more ominous unseen energy. He often spoke about the profound impact of sacred locations, describing them as places where the boundary between heaven and earth feels thin. To him, years of faith and prayer left a spiritual imprint, transforming ordinary spaces into reservoirs of peace and healing. Think of a church that has witnessed generations of devotion, or a quiet monastery nestled in nature. These are places where you can almost feel the prayers that have been spoken within their walls. But his beliefs didn't stop with places of worship. Padre Pio also warned about spaces where negative events had occurred. He believed that tragedy, sin, or prolonged suffering could leave behind an oppressive spiritual atmosphere. These locations, he said, weren't to be approached lightly, as they carried a heavy mystical energy that could influence those who entered. Imagine an abandoned home where you instinctively feel unwelcome, or a battlefield that seems to hold on to the sorrow of those who fought there. These are examples of the kinds of places Padre Pio cautioned against. For Padre Pio, the spiritual essence of a place was not something to be dismissed as superstition. He understood it as a reflection of the actions, prayers, or even sins of those who had been there before. This belief led him to emphasize the importance of being mindful of the spaces we inhabit and visit, as their energy can have a profound effect on our spiritual well-being. For Padre Pio, sacred places were more than architectural wonders or historical landmarks. They were living spaces charged with divine energy, places where the prayers and devotion of countless souls had created a connection to the spiritual realm. He often spoke about these locations as reservoirs of peace and grace, where the faithful could find solace, clarity, and even healing. Holy sites such as churches, shrines, and monasteries held a special significance in Padre Pio's beliefs. He taught that the collective acts of faith and prayer performed in these spaces over generations left an indelible mark, transforming them into sanctuaries of spiritual renewal. Think of the atmosphere in a place like the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi or the Sanctuary of Fatima. Even for those unfamiliar with their histories, these places evoke a sense of awe and reverence. Padre Pio believed that this wasn't coincidental. It was the result of divine presence manifesting through human devotion. But it wasn't only established places of worship that Padre Pio regarded as sacred. He saw nature itself as a canvas for divine energy. Quiet forests, serene mountains, and flowing rivers, these natural sanctuaries could serve as spaces for reflection and prayer. He believed that spending time in such environments allowed individuals to attune themselves to God's presence. Have you ever felt a deep calm while standing under a canopy of trees or gazing at the ocean? Padre Pio would argue that these experiences reflect the spiritual resonance of God's creation. One story often shared among those who study Padre Pio's teachings is his insistence on the power of pilgrimage. For him, visiting a sacred location wasn't just about honoring the past, it was about engaging with the spiritual atmosphere of the place. He encouraged believers to seek out sacred spaces as a way to recharge their spirits and draw closer to God. A pilgrimage, he taught, was as much about the journey inward as it was about reaching the physical destination. Padre Pio's views also offer practical lessons for modern life. If you can't visit a well-known sacred site, why not create your own sanctuary at home? He often suggested dedicating a corner of your house to prayer. A small altar with a crucifix, a candle, and a Bible can serve as your personal sacred space. By bringing faith and prayer into your daily surroundings, you create an energy that reflects your devotion, much like the great cathedrals do on a larger scale. In Padre Pio's view, the mystical energy of these spaces wasn't confined to history books or faraway lands. It was something you could access here and now, simply by being intentional about where you spend your time and how you connect with the divine. While Padre Pio often spoke about the uplifting power of sacred places, he also warned of locations where an entirely different kind of spiritual energy lingered, one that could unsettle the soul and even influence the mind. These places, according to Padre Pio, were imbued with unseen energy tied to negative events, sins, or prolonged suffering. He believed that just as prayer and faith could sanctify a space, acts of evil or tragedy could leave a spiritual scar. He often described these places as heavy with a dark spiritual atmosphere, places where the air itself seemed to carry unease. For Padre Pio, these were not mere superstitions. He believed that human actions, especially those steeped in sin or violence, could create a ripple effect, leaving behind an imprint that affected the energy of a location. A battlefield, a site of betrayal, or even a home where anger and resentment have festered for years. These, he said, were places to approach with caution. One compelling story tied to Padre Pio's teachings involved his sensitivity to negative energy. It said that when visiting certain towns or homes, he would feel an overwhelming sense of spiritual oppression, refusing to stay unless the space was spiritually cleansed through faith and prayer. On one occasion, he reportedly instructed a family to bless their home daily after sensing an oppressive, mystical energy tied to a long-forgotten conflict that had occurred on the property. His advice was clear: prayer and light can dispel even the heaviest darkness. Padre Pio's warnings also extended to the spiritual implications of neglecting places of faith. Abandoned churches or monasteries, he believed, could lose their divine energy and become susceptible to darker influences. Without the constant presence of prayer, these spaces, once sacred, could shift into something altogether different. This belief echoes ancient traditions that view spaces as living entities. When nurtured, they thrive. When abandoned, they decay, both physically and spiritually. But what does this mean for us? Padre Pio's insights remind us to be mindful of the environments we frequent. Have you ever walked into a room and felt an inexplicable tension, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of past emotions? Or perhaps you've entered a place that felt inherently unsettling, even without knowing its history. These experiences, Padre Pio would argue, are not to be ignored. They are indicators of a spiritual atmosphere that requires discernment. So, what can you do if you find yourself in a space that feels oppressive? Padre Pio believed that light always overcomes darkness. He recommended invoking God's protection through simple but powerful acts, sprinkling holy water, praying the rosary, or inviting a priest to bless the space. These actions, he taught, could restore peace and harmony, transforming even the most unsettling location into a place of renewal. Interestingly, his teachings also apply to the spaces we create. Think about your home or workplace. Are these environments filled with peace, or do they carry the residue of stress, conflict, or neglect? Padre Pio's belief in the transformative power of faith and prayer encourages us to actively cultivate spaces that reflect the energy we want to surround ourselves with. Something as simple as lighting a candle during a moment of reflection or placing a crucifix in your home can shift the energy, creating a small sanctuary in your daily life. For Padre Pio, the battle between light and darkness wasn't just a grand spiritual war. It played out in the spaces we inhabit every day. His message is clear: be aware of the energy around you and take intentional steps to align it with peace and faith. Padre Pio's beliefs about sacred places and their spiritual energy carry profound implications for how we live our lives today. In a world filled with constant noise and chaos, his teachings remind us that the spaces we inhabit matter, not just physically, but spiritually. The unseen energy of a location can influence our thoughts, emotions, and even our connection to God, whether we realize it or not. Consider the places you spend the most time. Your home, workplace, or even a park you frequent. All of these carry a certain spiritual atmosphere. Padre Pio taught that these spaces reflect the actions and energies within them. If your home feels tense or draining, it might be worth asking, what kind of energy is being cultivated there? Are there lingering conflicts or distractions pulling you away from peace? He believed that intentionality, through faith and prayer, could transform any location into a sanctuary of divine grace. This teaching is especially relevant in today's fast-paced world, where sacredness often feels like an afterthought. Padre Pio's emphasis on holy sites and sacred locations offers a challenge. How can we reconnect with spaces that nourish our souls? It doesn't always require a pilgrimage to a distant shrine. Sometimes it's as simple as creating a small altar at home, dedicating time to prayer in a quiet space, or even visiting a local church or peaceful natural site for reflection. What's more, his warnings about darker mystical energy teach us to be discerning about the places we visit. A bar filled with hostility, a home plagued by negativity, or even a workplace rife with tension can weigh on your spirit. Padre Pio encouraged believers to carry their faith into these situations, using prayer or symbols of protection, such as a crucifix or blessed metal, to shield themselves from negative influences. This isn't about fear. It's about being proactive in fostering peace wherever you go. Ultimately, Padre Pio's insights challenge us to take responsibility for the energy we allow into our lives. Whether it's through prayer, mindfulness, or intentional acts of kindness, we have the power to shape the spaces around us. As he often said, pray, hope, and don't worry. These simple actions, repeated consistently, can transform not just the physical spaces we inhabit, but also the inner sanctuaries of our souls. As we conclude this journey into Padre Pio's beliefs about the mystical energy of sacred places, one thing becomes clear. The spaces we inhabit and visit are far more significant than we often realize. For Padre Pio, these weren't just physical locations, they were spiritual arenas, places where the energy of the past and present intertwine to shape our connection to the divine. His teachings remind us that these energies, whether divine or dark, influence not only our surroundings but also our inner peace and spiritual growth. But this isn't just about understanding, it's about action. Padre Pio believed that we each have a role in cultivating sacred site energy, whether through visiting holy sites, creating intentional spaces of prayer, or cleansing areas that feel heavy with negative energy. Think about your own life for a moment. Are there places where you feel closest to God? Could there be spaces around you that need spiritual renewal? Padre Pio's guidance encourages us to approach these questions with both reflection and action. If you felt inspired by this message, here's where to start. First, take time to identify the spaces that uplift or drain your spirit. Perhaps it's your home, your workplace, or even a park where you go to think. For those places that feel peaceful, dedicate time to them. Spend a few quiet moments in gratitude or prayer. For places that feel heavy, follow Padre Pio's advice. Bless the space with prayer, light a candle, or invite a trusted spiritual guide to help cleanse it. Even small actions like placing a crucifix or saying the rosary can shift the spiritual atmosphere of a location. Padre Pio's message isn't confined to churches or shrines. It's about bringing that divine energy into every corner of our lives. Imagine transforming your home into a sanctuary where peace flourishes, or your workplace into a space where negativity has no power. These aren't abstract goals. They're achievable with intention, consistency, and faith. As Padre Pio often said, the soul needs time to reflect, to pray, and to rest in God's presence. By applying his wisdom, we can create those spaces wherever we are. Now, I leave you with this thought. What would happen if each of us committed to nurturing the sacred spaces around us? Not just for ourselves, but for our families, friends, and communities. The ripple effects would be transformative, bringing light into places that might otherwise remain overshadowed. This is the heart of Padre Pio's teachings, not just understanding the energy of sacred places, but using that understanding to bring more peace, hope, and connection to the world. If this message resonated with you, I encourage you to take the next step. Share this video with someone who might need it, and let's start a conversation about the power of sacred places and their impact on our lives. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more explorations into spirituality, faith, and the profound wisdom of figures like Padre Pio. In the next video, we'll dive into another spiritual mystery, the role of angels in guiding our daily lives, as seen through the eyes of Padre Pio. You won't want to miss it.